Namaste and in la catch, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's guest is Colin Kingsmill. Now, he is definitely one who is crafting a place from his kingship in that Kingsmill scenario. He is a whole human coach, a strategic advisor for placemaking in people's lives. He's he's self-employed, and his organization or his company is called Kalo, and its mission is to become a global provider of self-empowered healing. And that's really where it all comes from. He's a graduate of St. Xavier University with a joint major in international marketing, as well as international finance, which we're going to find out. That's almost sounds like an oxymoron with this kind of conversation, but Colin, great to have you here. Let's explore this.
It totally is oxymoronic. And Kalo isn't mine, by the way. Kalo is owned by a dear friend of mine, and I'm a practitioner there and a strategic advisor to her. So the whole human coaching though is mine, and with my partners. Okay. Yeah, it is an oxymoron, and it kind of represents a bit of a past life, if you like. The finance.
I can totally understand that. In that past life, let's go way back, and you're familiar with the Wayback Machine and Sherman and Peabody. I make that reference every once in a while. Sometimes it hits and sometimes it doesn't, depending on your age, right? Yeah. So in that Wayback Machine, let's go back to where you began, and the basic of our basis for our conversations are how we first get in touch with that inner awareness, drive, guide, ally, voice, instinct, whatever it may be for you. How did you first begin to get in touch with that, and what were the events going on in your life at the time?
Yeah, so I didn't get in touch with it purposefully. I got in touch with it. Yeah, I got in touch with it very much by accident. And the first part of my life I had crafted in response to my childhood. So I grew up in a certain way, and I decided that I wanted to become a professional, that I wanted to be successful, that I wanted to have money, that I wanted to travel, that all of the sort of the
basic
checklist,
right?
But I wanted to do better than that. I wanted, because I kind of grew up always as the loner and the strange kid and the kid living in the forest, and so I wanted the antithesis of that, and I moved to Switzerland. I got a job in Swiss banking. I mean, it couldn't be more sort of cliche, right? I got married.
But before we go into that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm curious that you said living in the forest. What do you mean by that?
So I grew up in the 1970s, and my mother and father were most definitely, you would label them hippies, okay? Or you would have anyway. And the first few years of my life, we had an orchard and, animals, and my mother was into the whole hobby farm thing, and my father was an artist. He still is. And I think I was probably about 5 or 6, and we moved to an island on the West Coast, one of the Gulf Islands. It was called Bowen Island. And again, to sort of, if you look at that situation now, it would be sort of this ideal Waldorf school kind of natural life, right? I mean,
so it wasn't something that you necessarily saw it was just your life. You were surrounded by all the opportunity.
It was just my life. My parents bought this property in a forest on the island, several kilometers away from anybody else and the school. So it was really remote and kind of idyllic if you were an adult, less idyllic, I think, if you were a child, wanting social connection and wanting to play after school and wanting friends and stuff like that. So
still plenty of places and spaces to explore in the forest. So, I mean, as a kid, I had the similar, it wasn't in a forest, but we had a woods that was probably half mile square that was about I don't know, less than a half a mile away. And so I'd go back there and I'd spend my days there by myself, kind of just exploring and having fun.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think a lot of the traits that I have today of being, comfortable in my own skin, happy to be alone, loving the forest, loving nature, getting out and doing sound baths. I live beside the forest now, so look, it was by all intents and purposes idyllic.
Right.
But it's something inside of me wanted more.
You had to get your worldly experience, so you went into a profession.
Yeah. So I thought, oh, I want to wear a suit and tie. I want to be, I want to be professional. I want all this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for about at least 10 years, I guess. And in the process, set up my own business in Switzerland, a financial services company, and I was ticking all the boxes, right? All the quote unquote success boxes. And in that process, I was becoming more and more stressed out as time went on. And I was around 30, 30 or 32 or something like that. And I had friends noticing. They're like, Colin, you need to tone down the stress levels because you're going to have a heart attack. And a really good friend of mine, she said, "Lo, come and do these Reiki courses with me." And I'm like, "What's that?" Right? I had no idea about any of this stuff. So I did the Reiki course, and I'm like, "Yeah, okay, that's kind of relaxing, and I get it." And I didn't embody it at all. It was just like fake it till you make it.
Right.
And then there was this opportunity to do something called rebirthing. And again, I thought, great, anything that can turn down the volume on my stress levels, I wanted to try. And
just a fancy way for hyperventilating, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Over-oxygenate the brain. I don't want to treat that lightly because it's a very powerful process.
Breath work is incredibly powerful.
Oh, yeah.
It's super, super powerful. So, but that's not what it turned out to be. It turned out to be an exercise in past life regression, where I started breathing, doing the whole thing. And then all of a sudden I started to see myself in all of these stories throughout history. And it was a
pretty trippy place to be, huh?
Oh, it was, and it was so vivid, right? It was so vivid that I was describing to the practitioner the places and the scenes that I saw. And I came out of that and I'm like, well, that was interesting. And she had written everything down.
Right.
And because I was so depressed and full of anxiety at that period, I also had a psychiatrist. So I went to my doctor in the afternoon and I said, who happened to be, you'd like this. He was a psychiatrist, a medical psychiatrist. He was a Swiss military fighter pilot. He was a Buddhist and a historian. So
what a great combination.
Oh, I mean, you'd go into his office and it was just full of books and model planes and, just steeped in incredible history and energy. And I told him the scenes that I'd seen and he knew where they were. And so he's like, oh, well, that you're describing an ancient trading route in Western Africa, or, that's not Elizabethan England, that's Southern Italy because of, these seals and images that you're describing.
Right. Now, isn't it interesting how connected that experience was? I've got, I don't know if it's a theory or just an observation from what I've witnessed with others and myself as well, in how we are able to tap into these memory banks, file systems, right? And from a perspective, I guess the best word to use for it would be soul, right? This greater self that, from what we understand, even with science now, that there is this process of reincarnation. Repersonalization is what your answer book calls it, because it's really not a reincarnation. It's your same character in a different body.
Right.
So that same energy has all these kinds of tendrils attached to it, that when you ask the question or open that door, all of a sudden, all of these other things start happening in synchronous order.
Yeah.
And the evidence being you being, from one experience to the other, and that awareness being able to share, or that person being able to share their awareness of what you just described and make it real, right? It's no longer imaginary.
It was very real. And the incredible thing, I mean, it happened, it was April 6th, 2001. It was a Friday. In the morning, I had the rebirthing. In the afternoon, I had my doctor. And I ended that day realizing, at least for myself, that I didn't have to accomplish everything in this lifetime. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was right. Yeah, it was just this, I'm like, oh, I don't have to do all this now, and I don't have to really prove anything to anybody. And on Monday morning, I quit. I gave everything away. I gave everything I owned away, clothing, watches, cars, yeah, everything. And within a matter of sort of a month or two, I moved back to Canada, to the West Coast.
Now that's a huge, dramatic change.
Yeah.
And you did it, right?
Yeah.
What was going through your mind at the time of that transition, and how did you compare and contrast, I guess, for lack of a better, the considerations that were going on in your head and your heart?
Yeah, I don't know if I did a lot. I don't know if I did a whole lot of analysis. I think I was really operating instinctually, and
okay,
I just knew that I had to shed the cloak of the past, the cloak and the mask and the I don't know,
everything,
the everything. Yeah, it felt very much just like a I don't know what call it rebirthing, because that was the exercise.
Emergence, maybe, or re-emergence. And this is significant that you describe things in this way, because you're in the feeling, the sensing, the knowing, right? That's not intellectual. That's not your brain functioning.
Yeah,
that's your being that's saying, okay, here's the shift that needs to take place, and the surety of which it is taking place, that you have that sensation of okay, this is my flow, if you will. And it feels like that. There's no question about it. There's no resistance. There's no, well, what if, right? There's just this sense of knowing and movement forward. It's phenomenal. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I just really knew that I had to go home, quote unquote. I just and I didn't know what was going to appear next or anything like that. I had no plan. I just knew that there was that intersection. I needed to take it and see what would happen next.
Yeah, kind of a hard left.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely a hard left.
Without the G's, right? Or more of the geez, this is fun, right? Now, in the process is exciting and fun and exhilarating. I think that it really is as you're going through that, because you feel like you've got the wind at your back, and there's very little effort that you have to put forward other than to just continue to say yes. Now,
that's interesting. That's interesting you say that, because at that point, I did start to begin just to say yes to opportunities and possibilities and things that were offered to me. and the subsequent sort of 15 or so years, 15 or 20 years have been a journey of just saying yes, without knowing what's beyond the door, I guess, right?
Well, let me ask you this, because I think there is a sense of what's beyond the door. It may not be clear, right, as far as the imagery, but there's a sense that goes along with that. And in that process, it reminds me of the three brain philosophy of indigenous folks that you may have run into yet. If you haven't, here's a really cool, tasty tidbit. Yeah. So their philosophy is we have three brains. The first is the gut, intuition. Second is the heart. Third is the brain on top of our shoulders. Right. And the processing of information. So when you think about it now, quantum physics is actually presenting the reality that this is so, now that we know that everything is made up of vibration, and the gut, the intuition, is where we sense that. There's neurosensors there. Then the heart is where we distill it and say, okay, is this desirable, undesirable? What, just have that sense of which part of the decision tree do we need to go to. And then we process it in the head as far as knowing the questions to ask, and the choices that come from that is the actions that we can take. And it's far different from trying to, theorize something and then shove that down through the body and then wonder why we have dis-ease, right?
I'm right there with you on all of what you just said.
I know, I can sense that. That's why I brought it up, because you have that. You're explaining. A lot of times we talk about things in such similar ways, and there's so many different ways to talk about the same thing. And it comes back to that sense, right? We can't think our way through a system built on vibrations. We have to sense our way through it. And that doesn't mean we're oblivious to it. That means we're very careful, considerate, conscientious, and conscious of the process.
Hopefully, hopefully. I do think, society and noise gets in the way a lot of the time. But boy, if you can be tuned into your radio station, kind of limitless possibilities, I think.
I do believe so. There are multiple or infinite number of possibilities to coagulate. And in that sense, then, how have you found that process of awareness, choice making, result, next question kind of process? How do you begin to become aware of that? Or maybe you haven't just yet, but I have I have a suspicion you have, and that's part of what your whole human coaching is about.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. So the years that followed that initial slamming up against a wall and then restarting, I really dove into everything that we've been speaking about a little bit earlier. I dove into metaphysical. I dove into reading. I went to the spiritual bookshop and got every book and read it all. Eckhart Tolle to Joe Dispenza to everything. I never really embodied it, though, until I hit another roadblock. Or maybe it wasn't really a roadblock. It was a gift.
There you go. Another opportunity to make a different choice.
Yes. So last year, so it's recent. So I spent a long time kind of knowing and understanding and believing and doing vision boards and manifesting, and I was pretty good at it. And I got a package of letters last year that were from my mother, written to her best friend when I was a child.
Wow.
And how do I phrase this? My father found them and gave them to me, and I don't think he read them. I don't suspect he would have given them to me if he had. But what they did, what they unleashed or unlocked or opened up were sort of all those years of childhood trauma that I had suppressed for years and years. So my beautiful idyllic childhood, with organic farm hobby, hobby farm mother and the forest and everything like that. I was really alone, and I was really frightened and sad and scared and feeling lackful, and insecure, and all this stuff that for years and years I had suppressed. And for most of my adult life, I was living through the lens of that sort of core wound of unworthiness, right? And so I got these letters, and I'm like, oh my God, that was really tough. And this is why I did all of this stuff for 20 or 30 years. And I just immediately, I dove into some trauma therapy, some loss therapy. I did some coaching with my coach. And I have to tell you, Zen, it's been the most, it sort of, what it did was it just kind of accelerated everything that I knew up here for the last 15 years or so, 20 years. And I just embodied it all. And it's only been sort of, 9 months, not less than a year. And I have to tell you, everything I knew in my head from the past, from the experience that I had, and from the reading that I've done, and from all the logical stuff, like you say, it was all up here. It just unlocked it in my whole body. And ever since then, I have to tell you, it's just been this incredible sort of joy and freedom,
you found
and lightness.
Yeah, the incredible lightness of being, right?
Yeah.
And in that process, did it feel as though you were bringing a lot of cycles back in and transforming them? The image, I just discovered this recently, and so this is one of those profundities that I'd mentioned in our talk prior, that much like, we can't think our way through a system built on vibration, we have to sense our way through it. Well, how do we do that? And as we build, and maybe you recognize this, that because you had this deep sense of seeking, you weren't really aware that what you were seeking was also seeking you. And in this way, applying the, let's say, the law of attraction factor.
Yeah.
And what I discovered was it's kind of like a tesseract. If you're familiar with
no, what's that?
A tesseract is you've seen images of this cube that's constantly, it's like part of it's moving forward, and then it folds in on itself.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So our intention our attention and intention are at a deep level in the future on arriving at loving and being loved, which is where the joy is, right? And in order to do that, there's also this undulating action or this reciprocation that takes place, where we pull everything that is our life along with us and gradually process it as we move forward and get clearer and clearer on what we're seeking, and that it's showing up now. So we have a direct experience as opposed to a theory or belief. And so we've exchanged a belief system for an experience system.
Yes. That's a very good way to articulate what I've been experiencing over the last 9 months.
Cool.
I've been saying sort of embodied. I feel as though I've finally embodied.
Well, that's the sense. You're being it.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful. I love that.
Well, thank you. I've been working because as we discussed my spiritual awakening at 18 earlier, I've had 40 years now to really work on this and to try and understand what it really means to be cosmic consciousness condensed into form, which we all are, right? And we have that band, there's various bandwidths on the planes of consciousness and so on and so forth. And yet we have this experience that's undeniable once we step on that path of the journey. And we start asking questions. So how did you find the questions that led you to the deeper discoveries and the experiences, the finding of the books and things like this? Do you recall any of those specific questions that you may have had that you knew couldn't be answered immediately and life had to unfold in order for it to be answered? Kind of like Brene Maria Rilke says, you can't answer the questions to what Einstein's thing as well. You can't answer the questions with the same thinking that created them. Similarly, you can't answer the question with the knowledge you think you have. Life needs to provide that answer, and you need to be okay with it taking time.
Oh, look, I think I didn't even know the questions. I just knew, I just knew that, I just knew that because of the experience that I had had, that there was more to existence than the physical, than the obvious, than the than the expected, than the so I actually really needed to formulate the question. It was just a sense of there's more here, there's more, there's a bigger story, there's more to tell, there's
well, sometimes we have those
I'm not articulating very well, but
and I wasn't sure you would. Most of the time we don't, because those questions happen at such a rapid rate as we're processing in our heads. 70,000 thoughts a day we're supposed to have. Well, if we put those in the same direction, we're still going to have a lot of things to keep track of, even if they are clear and focused.
Right. Yeah, I certainly know that like today or I don't know, in the more recent history of looking at all this and doing all this, I just enjoy the meditation work, and it's not work. I enjoy meditating and just feeling, getting connected to that universal energy and the frequencies that we're on and in. And I began, I don't know, maybe it just all kind of came to me after the experience of last September, this gift of letters and sort of the awakening or the seeing, the seeing of the oppressed memories that I had and just letting them go and unleashing that. All of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I've been able to meditate. I've never been able to do that, even though I read every single book. I mean, I've got hundreds of. I did every self-help book.
Hundreds of how-tos. This is
hundreds of how-tos and hundreds. But it was really only after that experience that all of a sudden I could meditate. 10 minutes and 20 minutes and an hour. It's like, I'm like, this is delicious. And then, I've heard about sound baths and I've never done them, but now I put my earphones on and I walk 3 minutes out into the forest, and it's just like this, I feel connected. I feel like I'm one with you and the trees and Mother Nature. And it's amazing. So yeah, I don't know if I asked questions or if the answers just kind of came, if that makes any sense.
It does. And yet the because we're not always aware of the questions, right? Because we can think at various levels. There's all kinds of systems working internally in harmony, hopefully, right? Sometimes they aren't. That's where we have cognitive dissonance, where our beliefs and our actions aren't congruent, right? And yet there's this essence that we sense, we feel. No words are necessary. They often get in the way.
Yeah. Yes.
Because it's a pure sense of things as opposed to a think of things.
Yeah,
It's an amazing experience.
I absolutely get that now. I think for many years I was in the logic and not in the magic. And now, now I feel
there's actually logic in the magic too.
Oh, I'm sure there is. Maybe that's the next book I need to read. You can send me some. I'm sure you can send me some reading that would help me explore and expand that that dimension.
There are some simple things, in understanding that in that development of how we experience those questions and answers, and the drive to further express who we are authentically. And those layers of who we are go clear back into our frequency and our genetic code, right? And somewhere, it seems, there's a bridging of those to where we can operate in the world and feel fulfilled by doing so in whatever chosen vocation we have. And it's where that inner and outer bridge takes place yet again. We can know and be internally unless we can operate externally also in that place. Then the two still are dancing a different tune, let's say. And as a sound immersion, I'm a progressive jazz and rock drummer, and so there's this sense in that thing, kind of like Csikszentmihalyi writes in Flow, the Psychology of Optimal Experience. Life is like a jazz quartet in a jam, right? Where you just lose yourself, the ego is gone, time disappears, you're just playing your instrument in a conversation. Consider your body being an instrument too. We haven't learned how to tune them, let alone play in concert yet. And that's what I feel this process coming out of COVID is about. It's the opportunity to discover self en masse that took place through the obsession on self-hygiene and sequestration. Now, some people may have, taken that path and had conversations with self. Others may have tried to keep themselves distracted enough to just get over the fear of what might be happening, right? And they're both of those. How did you notice your experience, and what did you go through during COVID, and the considerations that you had about the present and the coming future?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I was living in Italy when COVID struck, and had been spent about 12 years in Europe in various places, and the message that I got in my head was, it's time to come home. I'd spent 12 years. It's interesting. I'd kind of done 12 years in Europe and ended it, and another 12 years in Europe. So there's something there that probably for another conversation, but it was like, it felt like the end of an era. And
once is random, twice is a pattern.
Yeah. Right. So COVID hit, and everything in Italy shut down, and it was just sort of this dystopian. I'm sure you saw it in the news, and I just said to myself and to my partner, I said, it's time to go home. We need to go back to Canada, and I don't know how or why, but like I sort of do, but we chose the other coast. So I'm on the Atlantic coast now. Um, and decided to come to a very small town on the coast that's beside the water and beside nature. Because in that process of going, okay, what are we doing here? I think it's time to go home. I recognize that water and nature are my fuel sources. I certainly don't get them from a big city. We lived in London for 3 years, and that I felt very depleting. So I've really come home to, I mean, I have a red barn like I did when I was a kid. So there's been this real homecoming. So for me, the pandemic was about a homecoming, and then very shortly after that, the gift of the letters and the realization of that it was time to really come into my own power, and be what I needed to be this time around.
And you positioned yourself well as a result by following your bliss.
Yes. Right? Yeah, absolutely.
That's really that's a very Buddhist thing, that it's still it's what you do, right? That's the flow. Now, with that, I had a similar experience, although we didn't move. Yes, we did move, actually, but it was from, it was only a quarter mile away from one house to another in June 2020. So it was right, extreme of the pandemic. Yeah. But when it first started, we'd mentioned, we'd had a conversation earlier about the message I was given as a teen about having to help facilitate a new world order, and it would happen in my lifetime. Well, I've always had this question of, what do I need to do to prepare, and who do I need to be in order to step into that role as a facilitator? Right. Well, when we went on lockdown here, it was in March, and I turned to my wife, Luba, and I said, an interesting thing, she's from St. Petersburg, Russia. So we've got this harmony among people and planet from, two divergent nations. What a pair we are. And so I turned to her and I say, I really hope the obsession on self-hygiene and sequestration gets people to look inward. And sure enough, within a few months, and I also at that same moment felt like, okay, this is the beginning. This is what I've been preparing for 6 years at the time. Right. Be ready for. And I felt it, like you said, there was this knowing. Now, I had no idea how it was going to unfold. Still don't. All I know is I'm doing my part, as this conversation with you is. And right. In this preparation, many people started finding each other in virtual groups, and they want to work on creating things that really assist in creating harmony among people and planet, which is huge, right? Yeah. And then on the other side of things, in Schwab's book, which we decided to read just to see what the other side's thinking, he asked the question, can we be caring and compassionate coming out of COVID? Now, I wonder if he asked the question because they were preparing things to inhibit us from doing so.
Are you talking about Klaus Schwab, the
yes.
head of the okay, yep.
Yes, this was in his COVID-19 book. Great question, right? Of which we know those kind of guys already have an answer for, and that's what they're poking and prodding us with to see how they can manipulate it so we don't be caring and compassionate toward each other. And there's a lot of that happening right now. So all that aside, with what you've seen in your life and travels and the profession, and I mean, you've got a really rich personal and professional background and experience in multiple countries and in multiple ways. Do you see something akin to what we're talking about, people finding themselves and their place and position in the world in assistance of this emerging new world order that comes from within rather than some prescriptive narrative?
Yes, I really do. You know, I, I, and maybe it's, I don't know.
But if you did,
I do. I absolutely do, because I feel like there is an emergence,
Mhm.
right? Of it feels like there is an awakening. It feels like there is a desire to live differently, to be differently, and that's why I'm on this mission to help people rediscover their humanity,
Mhm.
right? I think you see the emergence of all sorts of festivals, all sorts of well-being festivals, community festivals, and places where people can come together. You see it, I think, in videos and documentaries where people are starting to kind of rise up. You see it
Mhm.
in Vandana Shiva around food, and the farmers in in the Netherlands. I think there is a bubbling up of humanity, and at the same time, you see kind of the not the crumbling, but you see the emergence of, you know, new types of media, new types of conversations,
Mhm.
possibilities like you and I are having today, of podcasters, of people in the media that are totally independent of, you know, big food, big pharma, big government, big everything, right? Um, I'm really optimistic about that. Um, much more than I was before. And you know, but at the same time, there's yin and yang, right? You see an incredible amount, and maybe that's just evidence of, you know, greater evidence of being disconnected. You know, even just in the United States, the number of challenges around mental health, around health in
Emotional
general,
health,
around
not just mental health,
emotional health.
because it's the
Um,
emotional health that produces the mental side.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know. It does feel like there is an awakening happening.
Mhm. Well, it seems to be everywhere, and
Yeah,
there's calendar references in the Sumerian,
mm,
Mayan, Aztec, Inca, Hopi,
yeah,
Egyptian, Hindu,
yep,
all of those give reference. There's
yep,
this upsurge. There's organizations, even you know, the Live and Let Live global peace movement emerged
yep.
in August of 2020. I wasn't aware
Okay,
of it until I interviewed the founder in January of 2021,
right,
and then became executive director in
right.
just a few short months afterwards, because it felt
Yeah.
like, okay, this is part of my path. And the universe made
Mm,
it so convenient that the law office that founded it, and Mark Victor is
yep.
the firm's principal, they're 3 minutes from my home. Of all the
Interesting.
places in
Okay.
the world that they could possibly be,
There you go.
you know, it's just there's setups going on everywhere. It's
Yeah.
just, are we willing to pay attention to them and to do the work necessary to fulfill them? And
Mm,
it is quite an effort. Now, the effort for you, how does it feel?
doesn't feel like an effort. Um, it feels more like a movement than an effort. Uh, I don't see it as work. You know,
Mhm.
it feels as though, yeah. I
That
mean,
was a loaded question.
I'm probably super tired today, and I should go have a nap and
No,
or
no,
go to
no,
bed.
no, no. The loaded
But
question was that
but
in anticipation of your answer being, it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel
yeah,
like an effort. It just feels natural.
yeah, yeah. It's as opposed to what I was doing before, and I was only recently that I stopped um, with sort of the management consulting side of things, and began to set boundaries and stopped saying yes
Mhm.
to everything that I didn't want to do, and really living in integrity with myself
Right.
and others. Um, this just feels effortless, and like, and even these conversations I'm having with people like you, and I love this, because I think it feels as though, this kind of conversation is sending out the right energy into the world for us to really come together as one humanity, you know. And there's so much division these days, right? I'm like,
well, our drop
hold
may
on.
become the ocean after a while, right? And many drops like us.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I'm looking at the planet behind you, and I'm like, guys, like, stop it with all these alphabet soups and flags and this and that and colors, and it's like we are one humanity on a little rock traveling at 1,600 kilometers an hour around its axis. Like, let's get with the program.
This is exactly the image that I want to get. Like, I've been off planet for many years, and most people think that I live there, and I may. However, in that cosmic consciousness condensing into form, I also have this direct experience that's very practical, pragmatic. I've got a couple of master's degrees in business as well, and I've had a lot of accomplishments that in one lifetime most people can't in 10. So
Right.
just because I've been able to say yes and figure stuff out, right?
Yeah.
One of the other things, the reason that I put this up as a background, is a dear friend, Edgar Mitchell, was the sixth man on the moon. And I'm not sure if this is one of his pictures or not, but he had a phenomenal experience. And I met him in '97, and we got really deep really quick. And I was managing an event that he was speaking at the time, and as being the manager, I had free reign of everywhere or anywhere I wanted to go. And we had several conversations in our green room, probably a half a dozen at least. And after the fourth, I think, he says to me, and we shared a lot of things, and I've had off-planet experiences and stuff like that since I was a kid. And he says to me, you know, I want to say something to you. I'm going to tell you something, but you can't tell anybody till after I'm dead. I didn't realize the amount of trust he put in me at the time.
Wow.
But I'm a man of my word. And so I said, okay. And he says to me, you know, when we detached from the command module and started descending towards the moon in the LEM, there was a metallic silver cylinder that spiraled around us all the way down to the surface. Wow. It was nothing from Earth.
Wow, wow, wow.
So here was a probe. He said he didn't know whether it was manned, unmanned, controlled from the surface, what. Wasn't even sure of the size of it. Only that he saw it. Even out of that, triangular window in the LEM. He wasn't sure if there was several, but he did see the one. So he was adamant that, here's a guy, right? You're going to trust what he says of what he saw. And so those kinds of things, it's like, all right, so there's a presence there. We're not aware of it. Could be why we didn't go back. As they said, hey, you guys can't get along. We don't want you here either. We went through that once before.
Yeah, I mean, good question. Like, why didn't you guys go back? I mean, you'd think that you'd go back. I mean, it looked like lots of fun.
Right, fun. Astronomical engineering events.
Right.
Just the amount of technology that went into it. And now that technology has gotten smaller, and we probably got a better ability to do so. And we may be going back and forth in some of the re-engineered craft that they have from Area 51. Who knows? Doubt it yet, because we don't have the ability to get along with each other. Until we do, it's highly unlikely, if there is a guardian force in the universe, that we'll be allowed to travel far.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we can't get along with our neighbors, so that makes a lot of sense too. That totally.
Well, it
makes sense.
It's hard for us. It's hard for the individual, I'm sure, because we are so blinded by the present and immediate past and future.
Right.
That we don't look long term. And like Native Americans, you look in 5 to 7 generations, right, before making choices and decisions about the tribe. we don't consider that. We launch into things with the novelty and the innovation and oh, gee, look at this fuel we discovered in the engines we make, and not realizing what it might do to the environment until many years later, and then still not correcting our course.
Have you, sorry, I
Sure.
interrupted you. Go ahead. And even like the way we think of history, right? Have you seen Graham Hancock's series on
I know Graham.
Such a fascinating,
Mhm.
fascinating rethink of our ancient history that I mean, who knows what kind of, once people start to accept it more, or who knows what kind of
But we aren't
possibilities
alone in the
those.
universe.
Yeah,
Gosh, what a novel idea, huh?
and fascinating. I love this stuff. I think it's just so interesting to keep asking, what's really going on, what's going on there, where they, keep digging. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, and Graham and there's another maybe 2 or 3 layers deeper into that arena, if you will, of people who actually have ongoing communication with other worlds, and the majority, I would say, far more than that. I haven't heard any that have had direct contact say that there is anything other than their guidance and assistance for us to evolve harmoniously.
It's a great message.
Well, with the technology, when you begin to break it down and look back and take a deep dive into frequency, right? In order to be able to travel through time and space, you have to have a particular frequency to be able to handle that. And in that frequency, there can be no malevolence. It's just impossible. You know how that feeling is when you feel connected and you're meditating and you have that effervescent, iridescent sensation going on inside of you. You can't hurt anything at that point. You don't even want to kill ants, let alone people. Right?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Anyway, I interrupted you. Sorry, I took us down.
No, you didn't. I tend to go on because I'm passionate about my experience and having conversations like this with you. Right. There's so much to share, so much to offer. There's so many rabbit holes in just my own experience, let alone yours and others. And be able to have these kind of conversations, to get vulnerable enough to share the things that maybe we wouldn't, in normal circumstances where we don't know the level of openness of others, right? Because we all carry that personal bias of something, and until we realize, oh, well, that doesn't serve me. You mentioned boundaries earlier. And one of the things, as you were learning to set them, why did you feel you needed to?
Oh, well, I felt I needed to because for many years I said yes 2 ways. I said yes to opportunities and possibilities. So I would go to another country or take on another project and have, some incredible experiences. But I also said yes when I shouldn't have or didn't, to people please. Right. So again, going back to the small t childhood trauma, that part wasn't useful. So I recognize that the people pleasing, saying yes to appease and to be liked and all of these things doesn't serve you. And I know now that by setting those boundaries and putting my oxygen mask on first, that I'm serving the world much, much better by and my dog, apparently. I'm serving the world much, much better by saying no to things that I don't want to do. And
well, it's
not
a sense
worrying.
too. You've got the two, again, you've got the decision tree, and you've got the sense of each one of them. One feels, this is an experience I want to have.
Yeah.
And the other is, how am I going to deal with others in doing so? And
Right,
that
right.
people pleasing, that's the first thing I know for me too, right? You want to please others and because you want to fit in, you want to feel like you belong. However,
Exactly.
people like us, the self-belonging is more important
Yeah. I recognize that
than
now.
others
It took a
too.
long time.
Yeah.
It took a long time to figure out. Again, it's connected to this gift and this experience that I had last September, and I see now how much the uh, the saying yes when you should say no brings you down. And because I'm finally embodying those three brains that you spoke about earlier, right? It's like, oh, yeah, I did a lot up here for a long time, some a little bit here, but it really took until I think really last year to get all three in alignment, right? To finally start listening to this one down here.
Interesting
And
how that Trinity shows up
mm,
everywhere,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then we try to label it and put it in a box or a book, and it doesn't belong. No,
Yeah,
tongue in
yeah.
cheek, right? Um, in this progression toward this emergence,
Mm,
how might you, because here's where, and the comment you just made is really pertinent, and the reason being is that over 80% of our viewers are 18 to 34.
okay.
So these are kids that I call them kids. I'm 66, or I will be next month, right?
Mm,
And what can I share? What can I impart? How can I serve the coming generations to the best of my ability? One of those ways is having conversations with guys like you and gals that are on this path too, so that then
mm,
we can share the wisdom garnered and maybe truncate the time frame necessary for those individuals to have their own transformation and get things rolling a little faster, or maybe a little more congruent with the unfolding of what's necessary in this natural new order that we're experiencing, and trying to figure out how to share it with each other so that we're most effective in creating the
right.
ways to realign the systems already in place so that they work
Mm,
in harmony and to the service of humanity.
yep.
And it's kind of like flipping the agenda from profit over people and planet to people and planet over profit. Doesn't do away with profit, because we need something to, it may
Sure.
eventually, right?
Sure, sure, sure.
However, we still need that profit in order to pay the people that work for us, or that we work for, so that we can live in the current
Uh,
economic system.
Look, Zen, that's my whole mission in life now, is to help people in that age group that your viewers are. It doesn't have to take you 30 years like it took me, right? And that's why I'm writing Fear Less, right? The 8 steps, and again, it's hard to articulate these things in a book, but at least it's a start, right?
Yeah.
I'm writing the book. It's 8 steps to get from fear to bliss or joy.
I love that.
And you really using my journey, my experiences, and my successes and failures and everything in between, to end the psychological suffering for them, to get them out of the grips of fear, so that they can be in this place of joy sooner than later, right?
Mhm.
So don't wait another day,
No, absolutely not. Jump in, dive in. You can
dive
swim.
in,
If you can't
dive
swim, let
in,
the current take you, because it will.
dive into your true purpose, to the service that you're going to be in, to what you're passionate about,
Yeah.
what is the impact you want to make, just do it now. What is what are the what are the archetypes that you need to grapple with and look at and play with, so that you can be in the highest order of each of them inside of you. Anyway, I'm babbling on.
No, you're not. Well, that's where, in my opinion, when we think we're babbling, we're actually saying some very profound, simple truths. And they're so simple and so profound that we think we're babbling because we're used to needing to be so complex.
Right.
Right. And we can be complex, and it doesn't have to be complicated.
Yeah. And I'm super passionate about this now. I've lived a life. I've lived an extraordinary life, good, bad, evil, and everything in between. And I know that people are suffering today. All you have to do is look at the data out there, and it doesn't have to be this way. That's my message. So
that's a foundation to start from, right? Just recognizing that, getting enough people to say, hey, look, it doesn't have to be this way. We don't know how it can be. We got to make the choice and agree that it doesn't have to be this way.
This is not normal. You don't have to be sick. You don't have to be depressed. You don't have to be full of anxiety. You don't have to be pill popping, right, to get through your existence. This is not normal. And I think what's happened in our society is this has become normalized, right? And that you can be so full of dis-ease that you don't even know it, that your stress levels can be so high, measured in cortisone and everything else, that your normal is basically freaking out all of the time.
Right.
So,
and we're so used to it that we don't know how to manage it, because it's just part of our lives, and we can go and be, this is one thing Lubin and I noticed during the pandemic. We didn't ever wear masks. I went out and did all the shopping. Yeah, I got booted out of a couple grocery stores because I wouldn't, but oh well. I would look at people in the eyes, even with their mask, and most of them would, immediately look down. However, I always had a smile on my face, and I could always see the eyes curl up. Right. So it just gave that moment. And even though, I wasn't going to take part in this fallacy, I remained healthy throughout time. I was, unaffected. Of
course.
Both of our, my wife's a piano teacher. Both of our businesses increased. I do coaching and consulting, web building, and partnering workshops for building road and bridge construction. So that didn't change. It increased. So that was an indicator that, oh, okay, well, maybe we don't need to buy into all the confusion and just live life as though it was how we anticipated it being.
Hallelujah. I mean, I had somebody at a gas station 2 days ago wearing a mask. I was coming out and he was coming in, and he literally leapt away from me. Right. And I said to a friend that I was in the car with, I said, I wonder, I wonder who has instilled so much fear in him, in May of 2023, that he still feels the need the fear of me breathing on him as I walk by. And he literally jumped away.
Hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions of them still.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've even noticed around here at home, lots more people wearing masks these days. And I never watch the news, so I suspect it's the news, saying something is coming, or I don't know what the hell, but it just seems it's wrong. It's wrong.
It's disappointing that our fellow human beings could treat others and manipulate and do all of those kinds of things, and yet we've been told that this is the process that we need to overcome. Even in the most recent versions, Howard Bloom's book, The Lucifer Principle. It's a scientific study of history. and how a few people manipulated masses by telling lies through the controlled media, whether it be a town crier or the internet.
Oh,
and
yeah.
This is old hat. It's been going on forever. And
Absolutely.
most recently,
Absolutely.
I mentioned Matthias Demont and the empathic resonance earlier that I'd heard when he was being interviewed with Tucker Carlson. He'd written a book. Matthias had written a book called The Psychology of Totalitarianism. And it was his view of what was happening from the pandemic. And what he said in a future hopeful that he saw in people, that what we really seek is empathic resonance. And that empathic resonance can't occur outside of love. True empathic resonance.
Right.
So
Beautiful.
the whole idea of loving and being loved is now being reintroduced with that question that Slav asked is, can we be caring and compassionate towards one another? Same question that was asked 2,000 years ago. Right? We still haven't answered it.
It's like taking us a long time to get with the program, isn't it?
Well, you consider, again, looking at the layers and the types of things, nations have personality, states have personalities, nations have personalities,
Sure.
globes have personalities. So in the long-term view of the evolution of a planetary society, we're still in our infancy.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I know that. It's a nanosecond. The last
and it's hard
years.
to refrain from judging the current situations because they are so incongruent with how we know things ought to be. And yet therein is our challenge to embrace, love it regardless, and do what's necessary to set the boundaries and eliminate the distractions by doing so. Because this is the more we advance, the more disciplined, the more even artistic and creative we become in doing so.
I agree. I see it as a challenge and as an amazing opportunity, Bring it on. Let's go. Let's do it.
So as we've speaking of going, we have just a little bit more time with what you've been through and considering, the 18 to 34 range, and even those a bit older, because there are those too, even our age, that are still advancing. What have you found that is a simple way to rethink the moment that you're in?
That's a good question. I mean, certainly meditation and mindfulness helps with that, but I also believe you need to do a couple of things. You need to stop absorbing negativity, right? And I see that in things like mainstream media or social media. Understand that if you are going to consume it, it is like opening a little box or big box of chocolates, right? So just recognize what you're eating and what you're consuming. I think for me, it's also about listening to yourself and those three brains, and then deciding that you are the owner of your universe, right? And painting the picture of what you want to be and where you want to go and how you're going to do it. And literally, I mean, paint a picture. Like I saw somewhere the other day, I love vision boards, and I've got one over there that I'm articulating and playing with, and I've got my book on another vision board with all of its pieces. And design the blueprint of your life, because if you don't, somebody else, some other architect is going to come along and do it. So for me, it is whatever metaphor you want to use, whether it's a vision board or blueprints or a painting, or I often use the metaphor of plant the milestone marker out there. Where is your ship sailing to, right? because if you don't know precisely the coordinates of where you're going, you're going to be guided by the winds, which might be fine, I suppose, but
if they're headed in the general direction.
Yeah, but I think this idea of claiming that responsibility, protect yourself like kryptonite against negativity and toxicity, design the picture that you want, and break it down into smaller steps, and then create daily rituals where you're cherishing that and nourishing it and not ignoring it. That was a long answer to.
No, I love the close of that answer. The daily, do it. That's the morning, evening, every moment you have, just to take a 3, 4, 5-second break and just go to that place.
You know what I call it? I call it the Flintstone moment, right? Like a Flintstone, not the Flintstones as in the old cartoon, but right. But it's like there's a nanosecond where the spark goes, and you decide, are you going to look up into possibilities and opportunities and the future and co-creation, or are you going to look down? And that is, you could be physically looking down at a smartphone, or just looking down into negativity, right? But you decide every moment, every nanosecond of the day. So decide when that Flintstone moment happens. Am I going up or am I going down? Am I co-creating, creating positivity or negativity, swirling down, reconfirming, negative stuff? But decide.
Awesome. Colin, this has just been a really wonderful conversation with you.
No, it's been super.
Full of insights and apocalyptic moments as well.
Well, I'm giggling like you were talking about before, but I feel like we could
giggle, right?
It is,
like,
yeah.
This was fun.
This was very fun. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. And I feel like we could have multiple chapters of this conversation in the future. So,
very much so.
If you'll have me back, I'll come back anytime.
We'll see what we can do. All right. Thanks again, Colin. And
yeah, you bet.
Namaste and in la catch. Thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and I will see you next time.